You're halfway through an argument. Your voice is sharper than you meant it to be. The other person isn't answering your point anymore. They're twisting your words, changing the subject, making the room feel like it's tilting. And the worst part, they might actually win. Not because they're right, because they know something you don't. But first, let me tell you why this matters more today than ever. The year is the 19th century. Europe is restless. Old religious certainties are cracking, empires are shifting, and the modern world is being born in smoke, steel, and anxiety. In the middle of it stands Arthur Schopenhauer, brilliant, bitter, isolated, and almost painfully honest about human nature. He wasn't the kind of philosopher who wanted to comfort you. He wanted to expose you. While other thinkers wrote about reason as if human beings were noble creatures in search of truth, Schopenhauer looked at ordinary life and saw something darker. Ego, vanity, appetite, self-deception, not monsters, just people. And that is why his work still feels disturbingly modern. Because if you strip away the powdered wigs and old paper, Schopenhauer was studying the same thing we live with every day: online debates, political spin, workplace rivalries, family arguments that were never really about facts in the first place. He understood a brutal truth of modern philosophy long before social media made it impossible to ignore. Most arguments are not fought to discover truth. They are fought to avoid defeat. His short work, often called *The Art of Being Right*, is really a handbook of rhetorical dirty tricks. In it, Schopenhauer catalogues the maneuvers people use to win arguments even when they are wrong. He called them stratagems, and if that sounds cynical, it is. But cynicism is not the same as falsehood. Sometimes it's simply what truth looks like when all the polite language is removed. Here's the tension at the heart of his philosophy. If argument is often a contest of ego rather than a search for wisdom, then what does it mean to live truthfully in a world obsessed with appearances? That question places Schopenhauer in a strange relationship with Stoic philosophy and ancient wisdom. The Stoics asked, "How do you govern yourself?" Schopenhauer asked, "What if the self you're trying to govern is not nearly as rational as you think?" And what he wrote next changed everything. Schopenhauer begins from an observation so simple it almost sounds obvious, until you notice it everywhere. He writes, "The truth is no doubt to be found if men would only seek it." That line is gentle on the surface, but hidden inside it is an accusation. Men do not seek it, not consistently, not sincerely, not when truth threatens pride. This is where most people get it wrong. They think arguments fail because people lack intelligence. Schopenhauer thought arguments fail because people lack detachment. The mind is often sharp enough to understand the truth, but the ego is too threatened to accept it. And once identity enters the room, reason quietly leaves through the back door. You've seen this happen, maybe in someone else, maybe in yourself. A conversation begins with a question and ends as a referendum on status. Suddenly nobody is asking, what is correct? They're asking, who looks weak? And here's the surprising part. This doesn't only happen in obvious conflicts. It happens in self-improvement culture. It happens in philosophy circles. It even happens in communities built around modern Stoicism, where people quote Marcus Aurelius while secretly using calmness as a performance of superiority. A person can speak softly and still be ruled by vanity. That's the scandal inside Schopenhauer's work. He forces us to admit that intellectual life is not automatically moral life. You can love philosophy and still use ideas as weapons. You can admire ancient wisdom and still be incapable of hearing criticism. You can preach life lessons and still be emotionally dependent on being right. And if that makes you uncomfortable, good. It should. Because Schopenhauer is not merely describing debate tactics. He's exposing the machinery of self-deception. Every bad faith argument has a hidden engine, the will. His wider philosophy is built on the idea that human beings are not primarily rational creatures, but driven creatures. We reason after we desire. We justify after we cling. We make a case after our pride has already chosen sides. So what looks like logic is often just instinct in formal clothing. That may sound pessimistic, but it's also liberating, because once you see it, you stop being hypnotized by surface-level cleverness. You stop assuming the loudest person is the strongest thinker. You start asking a better question. What is this person trying to protect? Their dignity, their tribe, their self-image. And then something changes in you. You become harder to manipulate, but there's something even more shocking. Schopenhauer's real target was not the liar across from you. It was the liar within you. Schopenhauer writes, "If you have no argument ad rem, you can make one ad hominem." In plain English, if you can't attack the point, attack the person. It is one of the oldest tricks in human history, and in the digital age, it has become nearly invisible because it is everywhere. You don't need to refute a claim if you can discredit the speaker. You don't need to answer an idea if you can make the audience dislike the person saying it. This is not just a rhetorical strategy, it is a social strategy. And Schopenhauer understood that arguments are never purely intellectual. They happen inside hierarchies of reputation, emotion, and power. Here's the controversial truth. In public life, the better argument often loses to the better performance. Not sometimes, often. That's not how we want the world to work, but it is how it works. And pretending otherwise doesn't make you noble, it makes you naive. This is where modern philosophy becomes personal, because Schopenhauer's lesson is not simply watch out for manipulators. It is, watch what happens inside you when you feel cornered. Notice how quickly you reach for irrelevance. Notice how temptation appears in real time to exaggerate, to interrupt, to reframe, to poison the well, to drag in old mistakes that have nothing to do with the point at hand. What are you protecting in that moment? Truth or ego? That question is where transformation begins, and this is where Schopenhauer unexpectedly intersects with Stoic philosophy. The Stoics taught that freedom begins when you separate what is in your control from what is not. Schopenhauer adds a darker but useful layer. Before you can govern your reactions, you have to admit how irrational those reactions are. In that sense, he is a harsh ally of wisdom. He doesn't flatter your potential, he diagnoses your weakness. That's why his philosophy can become practical. The next time you argue, try this. Don't focus first on winning the exchange. Focus on detecting the first moment your ego flinches, the first moment you stop listening, the first moment you begin composing your comeback instead of engaging the point. That tiny shift is the birthplace of dishonesty. And here's where most people really don't want to go. Some arguments should not be won, some should be left, some should be dissolved, some should be answered with silence, not because silence is weakness, but because not every arena deserves your mind. Modern Stoicism often gets reduced to emotional toughness, but real discipline includes refusing games designed to degrade you. This is where it gets interesting. Because once you stop treating every disagreement like a battlefield, you begin to notice who actually wants clarity and who only wants conquest. And the quality of your entire life changes with that distinction. Now we arrive at the deepest and most unsettling insight in the art of being right. Schopenhauer writes, "It would be a very good thing if every trick were defeated by another trick." That line sounds almost playful, but beneath it is a bleak diagnosis. Argument has become a duel of technique. One distortion counters another. One manipulation blocks the next. Victory goes not to the sincere, but to the skilled. If that were the end of his philosophy, Schopenhauer would merely be a handbook for cynics. But the real revelation is what happens when you read him against the grain. Because once you can identify the tricks, you have a choice. You can use them, or you can outgrow them. This is the emotional peak of his work. Schopenhauer gives you X-ray vision into the vanity of debate, and then leaves you with a moral decision he never fully resolves for you. Do you become more effective at winning false arguments, or do you become more committed to not needing those victories in the first place? That is not an abstract question. It touches your relationships, your work, your politics, even your inner life. How many fights have you had that were never about the subject on the table? How many times has a conversation about money really been about respect? A disagreement about chores really been about resentment? A debate about ideas really been about fear of insignificance? Schopenhauer helps you see that the explicit argument is often just the mask. The real conflict is beneath it. And once you start seeing that, you stop being seduced by the literal surface of what people say. This is one of the greatest life lessons hidden inside philosophy. When someone is desperate to be right, they are often desperate not to feel small. And yes, that includes you. That's why Schopenhauer matters in an age drowning in content, outrage, and reaction. We live in a culture where confidence is mistaken for competence, where certainty spreads faster than thought, and where public discourse rewards speed over sincerity. Ancient wisdom warned us about pride. Stoic philosophy warned us about reaction. Schopenhauer warns us about the humiliating possibility that much of what passes for reasoning is merely wounded desire trying to sound intelligent. So what do you do with that? You become slower, more precise, harder to provoke. You stop confusing verbal dominance with truth. You stop entering every conversation as a combatant. You learn to ask quietly, what is the real issue here? What wound, what craving, what fear is speaking through this argument? And here is the final synthesis. Schopenhauer teaches you how arguments are corrupted, but that knowledge becomes wisdom only if it turns inward. The point is not merely to detect fallacies in others. The point is to catch the moment your own need to be right begins to poison your perception. That is where self-improvement stops being branding and starts becoming honesty. Because the most dangerous argument tactic is not ad hominem, not deflection, not exaggeration. It is the silent belief that your ego and the truth are the same thing. Once you believe that, correction feels like attack, dialogue feels like threat, and wisdom becomes impossible. So ask yourself, when was the last time you changed your mind without resentment? When was the last time you lost an argument and became better because of it? That is the standard. Not winning, becoming worthy of the truth. Remember the scene from the beginning, the room tightening, the conversation slipping, the other person twisting the exchange until you can feel yourself reaching for sharper words. Most people think the critical moment in an argument is the final comeback. It isn't. The critical moment is much earlier. It is the instant you notice your own mind abandoning truth for self-defense. That is where philosophy becomes real, not in books alone, not in clever quotes, not in looking composed while someone else loses control. Real wisdom appears in the half-second where you could manipulate, exaggerate, humiliate, or posture, and choose not to. That choice is harder than winning. It is also rarer. Schopenhauer offers no easy comfort. He does not tell you that people are naturally rational, or that debate naturally leads to truth, or that good intentions protect you from self-deception. His gift is harsher than that. He teaches you to become suspicious of the hidden motives beneath argument, including your own. And strange as it sounds, that suspicion can become a form of freedom. Because once you stop needing every disagreement to confirm your worth, you become harder to bait, harder to flatter, harder to deceive. You begin to speak less from vanity and more from clarity. That is not just philosophy, that is power. So here's the challenge. For the next 7 days, in every disagreement, watch for the first surge of ego. Don't suppress it. Don't justify it. Just catch it. Notice when your goal shifts from understanding to victory. Notice when your tone changes. Notice when you stop asking what is true and start asking how to win. Try this for 7 days. Come back and tell me what changed. Because most people will spend their entire lives learning how to defeat others in argument. Very few will learn how to stop defeating themselves. And that is where wisdom begins.